All right, welcome to the Cubicle Liberation Podcast. I am Joshua Fletcher. You can call me Fletch, and I'm here with.
David Hood.
And today we are going to talk about a very kind of central concept for people who are looking to make the leap, get out of their day job, and really try their hand at being an entrepreneur. The main topic today that we want to make sure we kind of talk about and flesh out a little bit more for people is really kind of the mental side of things. I know for me, I have had a few jobs. If you listen to the introduction that we kind of gave ourselves on the previous podcast, you kind of know a little bit about what that was. But I've worked with enough entrepreneurs now online to see that there's one really critical element that they need to have in place that makes everything either work or not work. And it really kind of comes down to the mental side and what a lot of people would call discipline. When you've got a job, you typically know what time you need to start, what time you get, to take off work. If you've got vacations coming, it's kind of your boss's job to make sure that you get, the right amount of work, in front of you as far as tasks go. When you're an entrepreneur, it's not that way. It's not that way at all. You really, one of my mentors and business partners, a man named David Mills, says, as an entrepreneur, you really get paid to make sure that all the dots connect. And it's on you to figure out even what dots there are, which ones are unnecessary, which ones are critical, and then figure out a way to make sure that you can get the project accomplished, right? Get all those dots connected so that you can have a viable offer, product, and business if you're going that direction. David, do you have anything to kind of comment on that before we jump back over and maybe talk a little bit more about maybe personal experience and some of the things that we want to shed some light on today?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think it's very accurate. I think that there's something that you came up with, which was that in this podcast, like what they're going to get out of it is essentially like the main thing that employees need that they don't realize, and how to achieve that most effortlessly. I thought that was something that you put that I thought was at another discussion we had that was really good.
That's right. Yeah, I it almost forgot about the kind of the hook and the intro, and
Yeah.
for me, I'm glad you actually read that and brought that back up, because the key, it seems like, in life is to make the things that are necessary things that happen automatically.
Yes.
Right? And that is, I think, where a lot of people go wrong and are kind of misled a lot by pop culture and all this, hard work and discipline and, getting more out of yourself and all that type of thing. It makes for a great movie, but it doesn't always make for a great life if you're just continually just pounding on yourself and trying to make yourself do things that don't feel comfortable or natural.
Yeah, I think a really great example of this is like one of the best ways to eat healthy isn't to like have this, increase your willpower, which, there are ways to do that. Science shows that, but to like get at your house, when you go get healthy food, put healthy food at your house so that it's right in front of you. If you have candy and ice cream in front of you at all times, it's gonna be a higher effort. But if you have healthy stuff, you're gonna make that work. It's gonna be a much lower bar for needing to like kind of push through on something like that.
Yeah, let's I don't know if there's a better word for it, because hygiene typically just has a lot to do with, like, keeping your body clean, but keeping your house clean, keeping your mind clean, not having, all the influence of those distractions, constantly there. If you see a piece of cake, you've got to almost ask yourself in your head, oh, should I eat that or should I not eat that? It's a question that comes up just by noticing it or seeing it. And by and large, those are things that just suck a lot of the willpower. If you've got 10 units of willpower, you want to use those units on the right things, and continually having to tune out TV that's going in the background, or a huge inbox full of emails that you think you need to go through and figure out what new products are going to solve all of life's problems. It really can just kind of suck that really clear-headed willpower to do something. You can spend that poorly.
Yeah. The science on this is that you do have some amount of willpower, and you, basically at the beginning of the day, you have kind of a full, let's say 10 units of it, and you use it throughout the day. And there's another thing that's really important that you kind of touched on, which was like, you got to be careful what goes in your mind, and it's even worse than like food, because like cake doesn't jump into your mouth, while like media can jump into your ear. You can be even just like at a store or at a restaurant, and they've got like mass media on that is going to jump into your ear or your brain. So being careful to kind of to set up systems or whatever to where you don't need to use your willpower units on that. You can use them on, like you said, the important things. I think is really important.
Yeah. So let's. I think this definitely kind of fleshes out what we want to talk about here, but that's all well and good. But how do you figure out what's important, right? How do you allocate your resources, whatever they might be, on the right type of thing? We talked about this being really a mental game, and really trying to get yourself in a position where it feels nearly effortless, or very natural at least, to take care of the things that are important, get them done, especially without the structure of a job or a boss or something like that. What I found, there's kind of, especially with online kind of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, there's kind of the information marketing side of things, and everybody's got a product, and everybody's got an email list, and everybody's pushing this solution or that solution or whatever. We almost kind of call that like shiny object syndrome or something like that, right? Every time you open your email or jump on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be, you're just bombarded with some new thing that solves a problem. And many times the products are good, many times they're not as well. But if you had to consider every single offer that you encounter, which in some way you have to, right? Or you just totally ignore it maybe. But if you have to do that and you feel like it's a loss if you don't, you're really kind of, you're already in a losing situation, because there's no way that you can take advantage of all the offers out there. And so what it really kind of then points to is, well, when do you go looking for new information, new frameworks, more details on making money? Let's just kind of simplify it down to making money on the internet. When do you go look for a new product, and when do you just continue to work on the one that you're already invested in and going with? Do you have any structure for how that decision's made on your end?
I do actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're just starting out, this is more difficult, because you don't have. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. You don't have like a framework for how to decide on this. So it's more difficult. But as you kind of just jump out there, so I'd say if you're just starting out, you probably just want to like jump out there and just like try stuff and just kind of dip your toes in several things. But I think for me personally, how I do it now is I start with, is it relevant to my goals? There's tons of great products out there that are just not relevant to my goals or goals or priorities right now. And so, if it's not relevant, then it can be the best product in the world. I just don't care. And so that is one kind of important thing. And I think how do we figure out what's important? I think another way to go about this is to ask more questions about, what is important to me right now? What are my objectives here? But in terms of like, how do I start? Man, it took me so much longer to kind of find something that really worked well for me, that maybe I'm not the best person to ask. How would you start? Let me ask you that. How would you start? Like let's say you take yourself back to that, that day that you bounced. What was like the first question that you asked yourself, and then the next maybe 3 questions?
Yeah, I think that's actually a very practical way of going about doing it. Is to actually go back and look at actually what I did and how that decision making process worked, and then not only that decision, but then what the next 3 to 4 months of my life looked like, right? Because that was really what what set me up for success. Yeah, finding a product, a program, a community that worked, and that it wasn't just a bunch of hogwash that really didn't wasn't current, wasn't workable, wasn't scalable. So there was that, right? And honestly, I'd have to say a little bit was luck, right? Because I had not looked at a lot of offers online.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It just so happened that the one I found is the one I still am actually working with and in now, and has taught me really how to rank websites on Google, as well as a lot of other things. But that really was kind of the driving force. In a certain way, I think maybe my experience leading up to that with having a construction company, and I'd built a website that just didn't get any traffic. When I went to try to find a solution to getting more business into my construction company, what I did was go on the internet and look. And I think there was a certain way that I was putting kind of two and two together there to say, you know what, if I have a problem and I'm doing this, then there are a lot of other people who have similar problems and go to the internet for a solution. And I didn't know anything about doing keyword research, which effectively is like doing market research to figure out if there's a market that you can serve with your offers. I knew nothing about any of that. I think really what it did come down to, though, was seeing someone who had proof that what he was doing worked, right? There were examples of this in practice that were getting, that were ranking on Google, that were getting traffic. I didn't have to worry about, how do I come up with an offer, because I already had an offer, right? It was my construction company.
Right.
And so that simplified that aspect of it. And I also was not apprehensive about putting myself into the marketing, right? I could write about these things firsthand, personal. And so being able to talk about it now, I have better language to understand that what my business lacked was traffic. It needed to have more traffic, more eyes looking at my offer.
I think this is a really good point to actually step back and look at the kind of like, what are the three things that a business needs? Yeah. And you're familiar with this, and I didn't come up with it, neither did you. David knows, at least that's where I learned it from.
Yeah.
He made it up, but traffic, conversion, and product, all businesses can be broken down to that. And so I would say a good way to start would be look to build your skills in traffic, conversion, and product. Maybe sometimes there's a shortcut. So like for you, you already had a product and you already had some experience in like conversion. So really all you needed was traffic. And for me, when I quit my job, I didn't have traffic, I didn't have conversion, and I didn't have a product. And maybe that's why my path took longer to get something.
Yeah, it's quite possible. It seems, probably fairly likely that, when you have, but it's three variables. And if each of those variables can be set to nearly anything, then yeah, it takes a little longer to solve that equation for you. So anyway, I very quickly was able to kind of put two and two together and realize that what my business needed was more traffic. And, for whatever reason, I think a lot of it had to do with, having been an athlete, and I understood kind of the mental side of like preparation and like hard work and getting ready for games and practice and that type of thing. I was able to get myself in a position where my life, my day, my decisions, it was very obvious to someone looking at how I operated for the next 4 months there after I bought into that program. It would be very obvious to see what my priorities were. And I think that is one of the things that I want to try to kind of get underneath either today or kind of as we go along in these podcasts, is that you can, in a certain way, you need to kind of read your own mind. And you can kind of tell what your priorities are and what your goals are by the decisions you make and the things you think about. But you have to kind of create some space to be able to actually look at yourself and see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, or what you do first thing in the morning, or what you do when you might feel a little stressed or a little tired or whatever, what you go to. And We talked about this a little bit on the podcast last episode, as well as just kind of in general. The simpler you can get your life as far as like clearly understanding what your priorities are, the easier it is to make decisions and actually take action.
I love it. Let's say that again, because I think that is.
I hope I can. So I think it really, I don't say it boils down to, but just in general, the simpler you can have your life, the easier it is to make decisions and actually get yourself to take action based on those decisions.
And I think this is so important, and I think it comes down to like just like being focused, and it's better to be really good, typically, not always, but really, really good at like one thing versus being like pretty good at like five things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I think this is also down to kind of like mastery. So when you simplify it and you say, also when you have it simplified, you can look at, so there's unlimited possibilities for the actions that you can do today. And something pops into your mind and you ask yourself, oh, is that important? Is that something that I'm going to want to do? If you have kind of a simplified priorities, then you can just kind of put it up against that and you can reject most of the ideas that come into your head. So I think simple and clear is kind of another way to put it, of what is important to you and what you need to do to get done to move yourself forward towards your goals and objectives.
Yeah. So like in practice, what that looks like for me right now, as of 2019 when we're recording this, I went through and I really cleaned up a lot of the things that I had for goals, right? And it's interesting. It's kind of like the car example. Like if you buy a yellow Corvette, you start seeing yellow Corvettes all over the place. But I've seen this quote now from a few different people that really points to the fact that most people don't truly want to be successful. They want to feel successful. And you can trade the word success there with anything. Most people don't really want to be rich. They want to feel rich. I think we see
Which is
supporting evidence to everywhere.
Yeah, like someone buys a car they can't afford to feel.
Yep.
Like they,
the constant switching out wardrobes, the gratuitous use of all sorts of illicit substances to get yourself to feel a certain way, even though you can feel happy, even though, which in a certain way is like you're happy, but you're just really kind of trying to you're trying to get that feeling more than you're trying to be that thing. We look at people do this all the time with plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery for different reasons, and even not going to that extreme, very, I guess, tangible example. When I look at my own life, I really want to actually achieve things more than feel like I've achieved them. And this really is a practical way of looking at the way you structure your day. I've had a lot of really great advice from people that I work with now, and one of the best pieces of examples of this that I think I've ever received was that people who brag about how hard they work, you're usually going to be better off if you're not working at 90% of your capacity every day. Like you literally need to have some, like spinning reserves, like some extra resources available, like mentally, so that you can make better decisions. I think a lot of people who are in jobs, I've worked with a lot of very, blue collar people, mechanics and construction workers, and there are people who for 30 years will work hard each and every day. And they're able to, make a good income, but by the time they come home, they're kind of just, they're not trying to, start a new career or anything else. And that's all well and good. But if you transfer that same type of work ethic blindly into what you do online without somebody else making sure that you're doing the right thing, I've seen a lot of people work really, really hard at the wrong things,
Yep.
and wind up at the end of that period where they were working really hard, almost getting very like disenchanted and like saying, well, this doesn't work, or this internet lifestyle thing isn't all it's cracked up to be. Maybe it works for somebody, but I came late to the game and it's not working anymore. And I think it's a symptom of that working really, really hard and not knowing what to work on that makes it feel like that. I don't know if you have any comments on that, David.
Yeah. Activity is not necessarily progress.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a good way to put it. If you're running in circles, you might feel like you're getting somewhere, but you're not. Actually, I have an interesting kind of analogy to this. When I worked in the factory at Texas Instruments, so there's sort of like a capacity of the factory, how many wafers we can put in at once. And when you start getting close to, as you start getting closer to 100% capacity, the variability of the factory goes up exponentially. So there's like a huge difference between being at 80% and 90% capacity. And when you're at 80%, like you could have 5 to 10 times the amount of variability at 90% versus like 80%. I'm kind of estimating these numbers, but
Sure.
There's graphs that I've seen that show this. This is kind of not exactly the same thing, but I think it's kind of a situation. And I do think you're totally right. You need some unstructured time, not so much to wind down, I think, but more just to kind of let your brain process things. It's sort of like sleep. You need sleep so that your brain can kind of process things to a certain degree, trim the things that aren't relevant, and focus and process the things that are kind of important. And you need some like conscious time to do this as well. Not that you can't be focused. I think that for short periods you can do this, but I think you're totally right. Also, if you do this too much for too long, and especially if you're new, and even more so if you're new, and you're not really sure what you need to do, you can just like go on this whole path, and you can spend tons and tons of time on something that really isn't that important, or that really isn't going to move you towards your goals. So I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think maybe just kind of like a practical example of that almost right now. Well, so going back to kind of what that decision looked like when I bounced, right? I like that word. I'm going to start using it more often. So when I bounced, I bought into a program. I went through the training enough to understand what I needed to do, right? And I'm not saying perfectly, but like there was a certain style of website that I was building that was just generating leads for my business, right? And they were simple websites that I could build. I could actually build the entire website, write all the what you call copy, write the content on the pages. I could do more than one of those websites per day. And once I got to the point where I could build them that way, I understood kind of WordPress and how to set up servers and web servers for the websites and that type of thing. That's all I did. I just built 60 websites over the course of the next couple months, and then did the other things I needed to do to get traffic to those websites. But I didn't go look for more things to do. I wasn't really trying to learn maybe conversion better. I wasn't trying to figure out how to get traffic from pay-per-click, right? I couldn't afford it. So, for me, doing that in a way where it's just like I almost had my head down. It wasn't that I wasn't, aware of what was happening, but I wasn't considering anything else until I built those websites and, one way or another figured out if that was going to be the answer to my kind of current predicament with, lack of revenue and lack of customers.
Yeah, I think that's important because it's what you did was so if you're going to, but let's assume that there's, all these products out there and they're on the range of from crap to good. Even if you get like let's say a product that's like say a 6 or a 7 out of 10, but you get into it, you do it, and you focus on it, that's going to be kind of like your best path I think, in general, because maybe you don't get great success out of that, but at least you get everything out of it. You genuinely try it. You get data. Like you built 60 sites as opposed to just building one site. Now the data that you get from one site is not very telling. If the site doesn't rank and doesn't generate anything, you haven't really answered the question of is this a really good path? Yeah. And so you like went like really far, and you had tons of data, and so you knew for sure, after 3 to 6 months whether or not this path would work. So if it didn't work, well, at least you like committed to it for not forever. If it doesn't work, if let's say you buy a product and it's a 3 and you commit to it, but then you get the data back and it doesn't work. Okay, well, you kind of still have a data point there. You stop listening to that person that sold it to you or whatever, and you move on and and maybe there's still some things that you learn, but there's also pieces of the puzzle. So maybe the product was a 3 because there's 7 pieces of the puzzle and they only give you 5. So maybe it really wasn't a 3, it was just a 3 for you. And so you learn maybe those 5 pieces of the puzzle. So now you got to go find those other 2, assuming even if you might not know what those other 2 are or how many there are. So just kind of like focusing and really like understanding the things that you did learn. I think that was really, really helpful and really smart.
Yeah, there's something that you kind of spoke to there that I think is really it's really helpful, I think, and will be helpful for a lot of people. Sometimes that product that's only a 3, actually it has 2 or 3 things that are a 10, but it's just incomplete, right? It's not the full thing that you need to have it as a standalone solution. And going through 3 or 4 of these kind of lower performing or non-comprehensive products or programs or whatever, that may be exactly what you need to put all the pieces, connect all the dots that are necessary to actually make something work. And if you come across a product, work went into it one way or another, right? Either to promote it or to create it or to sell it or whatever it might be. And I think a lot of people would benefit from making sure that they have something to take away from all of their activities, right? What's kind of the big takeaway of a product that didn't work? Well, I bought it, so evidently it was marketed well, and the product wasn't good. So, you can learn things from that.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of one of these, I don't call it a secret because I'm talking about it on the internet, but I think it's something that not many people do. Is to really be able to look at yourself, your own decisions, and to kind of understand your own mind and subconscious and your goals that way. It's really helped me a lot of times start to see things like that, right? To notice like, well, this thing sucked, but I bought it. Why did I buy it?
Yeah.
Is it that I'm a really bad decision maker, or was the vision I had when I was reading the sales letter completely different from the reality of what the product was? In a certain way, you can kind of almost think yourself through understanding things, if you know how to think and take a step back and not, attach yourself to, oh, well, I'm just a failure. If you say, well, this didn't work this time, you've created kind of some space and not really owned, some permanent quality. It lets you, kind of feel like you can, feel like when you notice things, you can change them, and it's not going to just be the end of the world, I guess.
Yeah, and I think kind of like planning for a certain amount of failure. And failure is probably not the right word, like setbacks or walls that you have to break through, I think is really, really important. You like I said, you had the conversion in the product, but let's say you didn't have that and you came across something that gave you all the traffic, but it didn't make you money. Maybe you just have some other things that you need to break through. I think planning that into there is going to be really helpful and give you a good attitude towards, okay, well, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? And then I want to focus more on like understanding, because I know we both agree upon, like understanding is like the kind of really, if there was like one single thing that like makes your life better, it's being able to understand things, it not just business, but life as well. And so the kind of the natural conclusion of that is that understanding how to understand is critical to your success. So that's sort of like where And then in order to do that, you have to be intellectually honest, and you have to kind of really think about like how you're not just the brain in general, but your own brain and your own life works. I think is going to be sort of like the starting point for a lot of people. Okay, well, maybe you already have this down really well, or maybe you don't. If you don't understand how to understand, then it's going to be really hard for you to evaluate whether or not a product is going to be good for you, or evaluate whether or not, like, did this really work? Did this work as promised? Again, maybe there's pieces that you were missing that you can identify. Okay, well, this part did work. It did get me traffic, but I wasn't able to convert it. Okay, so now I need to work on conversion. So really being able to kind of have processes and understanding, and that's just going to be super critical, I think. What do you think about understanding how to understand?
Yeah, no, I like kind of where you're going with that. So one of the things I noticed about my life, every time, I kind of take inventory of how things had gone. This is up to, several years ago, maybe when I was, I don't know, maybe call it 4 years ago, right? I looked back over my life and I realized that I had achieved almost everything that I had gone out wanting to achieve, right? I say almost, obviously there's some things that I didn't get, all the way to what you call success with. And my life didn't work. And I think really what that did is it opened me up to realizing that we really do achieve almost all of our real goals, but we have a really poor ability or method to figuring out what those goals should be to make ourselves happy.
Default method.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. We're going to talk about method. That's going to be definitely a term that you want to jot down if you're listening, because it's, to me, it's the difference in, the context, right? If you're in a Tony Robbins seminar and he's up and clapping and the room's full of energy, and you feel like you can run through a wall or walk across coals, right? That's kind of one of the things that they do there. Why don't you feel like that when you're at home in the middle of the night and you woke up because you have anxiety and you think the world's crashing down on you? Like, what about the feeling you have is so different in those two different contexts? Why, when you put a suit on, do you walk around and maybe feel more confident, and other times when you have athletic clothes on, you actually feel stronger? Like, there's a lot of things in life that it when you look at it just as context, right? This is kind of going back to what I studied in grad school with social psychology, and one of the reasons I got, I guess, quickly bored with the material was that everything is context, right? Your context, your surroundings, your environment, the people around you are absolutely going to have the biggest effect on your life of anything. That doesn't mean they have to, though, right? Because there's obviously people and there's times when we have kind of overcome our surroundings or our environment or our current group of peers or whatever it might be, and really achieve something spectacular. And to me, that was this question that I was just really curious about. And I wanted to figure out if there was a way where I could make good, sound decisions regardless of whether I was freezing to death or on a beach or I just worked a 100-hour week or I just come back from vacation. If I could make decisions in each of those scenarios equally well, then that would look like a success to me. It would look like something where I didn't have to continually try to pump myself up every day to get myself to take action and to get things done properly. And I think that's one of the reasons why looking at a method of understanding was really such a, I was so open to that, right? That was something I didn't think I already had worked out, right? And I think that's one of the tricks that our brain kind of plays on us, is to say, oh yeah, no, you're smart. And so, and here's this evidence that you're smart, right? Your brain kind of works by association. It's like, oh, you got good grades, and you learned this new language really quickly, and you can recount a lot of facts about history. So you're smart. So you then, ergo, you make good decisions. And that's really not the way it is at all. And I think that from everything I've experienced in my entire life is the crux of setting yourself up in a better position in the future, is being able to address that question.
I like that.
Yeah, so yeah, I kind of rattled off for a little while there and lost my train of thought as far as where I was coming back to. But because our brains work by association so much, right? So it's like, all right, so here's the situation. And then my brain's like, parents go away on a week's vacation, right? And then I start talking about Will Smith, and then I talk about Independence Day, and then I talk about a post-apocalyptic world and whether there are aliens, right? Those are all just one, like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Your brain just naturally does that. And we have to account for that, and it's not that the brain is doing something wrong. It's just that we, in some ways, need to steer it as far as when we're making decisions in a different situation, a completely different mode or method. And, for me, I think that's been one of the things that when I can do that properly and when I have my life really simplified, it's just easy. It's like, okay, there's a whole big plate of food and everything on it I can say, is this healthy or not? Because that's like my number one goal, for this time in my life is health. I've got good relationships with my family, and I need to maintain those, right? I don't have to go out looking for more and new on a very personal level. And then, my kind of goal is health, and I need to, I'm also not retired, right? Financially speaking. So I need to make money as well. And so my life boils down to those 3 things, and that's it. If I find myself doing anything else,
that's what exactly. Oh, go ahead.
No. That's the culmination of everything I wanted to say. So I'd love your
funny that you should say that. Because I've been saying that for a while to people. Is like, look, 99% of my life is my health, and that includes like sleep, my family, and my business. That's like 99%. Everything else, anything that falls outside of that, and this is where simplifying is helpful. I put a low priority on it, and basically, by family, I would say, and friends, like social type stuff, because friends are very important. We're social beings, and it's important to be social. But family is probably the lion's share, because I have kids. It's the lion's share of sort of like the kind of social thing. And having a simplified thing, like I'm a Mavs fan. I like to watch the Mavs, and I wish I want to watch the Mavs more, but at the same time, it doesn't fit. It fits into the social to an aspect, because I have some old friends that are Mavs fans, and it gives kind of like connects with them. Okay, so it's not completely outside of that, but in general, like watching like a whole 2-hour game is, while I would enjoy it, it's not something that falls under my goals right now. And sometimes I do that, but in general, it's not something. That's why I say 99%. There is some time that I have set aside for that. And so I think that simplifying it like that is just so helpful, because anything that comes in to your, like, there's all these things competing for your attention and your time, and you can put it up against those 3. And if it doesn't significantly help with any of those, then you eliminate it. And I think that you said something also about that I want to focus on, which is I want to kind of elaborate on, which is I like thinking of things as like process is more important than performance. For example, when it comes to decision making. If you buy 100 lottery tickets and you win, was that a good decision? My answer, I think a lot of people would say yes, and my answer would be no. Or like another example, maybe a little bit more reasonable example would be, I heard of this guy who sold all of his belongings, took the cash and went and bet it on like red at the casino, where there's red and black, and so he had like a 49% chance of winning. Was that a good decision? I'd say probably not, even though he ended up winning. So I would think that really understanding how to make the decision. In the end, the process will beat out the performance. Yes, you will get lucky, and there will be fortunate things, but if you are making decisions right, and not so much like you have to be perfect and every decision you make has to be like a home run, but more about like trying to constantly hone how you go about making your decisions, and how you understand that process is going to bear. It's not going to be like, it's probably not going to bear fruit like right away most of the time, but long term, it's going to bear just about as much fruit as anything else you could do in your life.
Now with that, David, I really like that. So with process for you, is it about duplicatability? Is it about scalability, simplification? Like, what is it about process that, like, what quality does process have that lets it be, like, because I agree with you, right?
Yeah.
The lottery ticket example was great. Was that a good decision? Well, no. Does it mean it turned out bad? No, but it wasn't a good decision.
Right.
I think we kind of, we confuse those two a lot. And that's just so blatant, but like, we do this every day. Was it a good idea for you to go out and, eat 3 cheeseburgers and, have some beers, and you wound up just happening to sit next to somebody else, and then that turned into this, great partnership or relationship or whatever it might be? The answer is probably no, but it worked out okay.
Right.
And I think there's so much that turns out just to be luck that we want to turn into some kind of process. I think that's maybe one of the problems with it.
So I think what is important about process is that it's constantly happening. There's nothing you can't not have a process. Even if you think you don't have a process, that's your process. And so you go to make a decision, there's a process that's happening, even if your process is what feels good, what I'm going with my gut, which if you're going with your gut on things is only a good process if you're extremely experienced on that. So for example, like a 30-year-old cop, determining if someone is, assuming it's a good cop, which I think most good cops are. That's not a comment on cops, but just let's say this is a cop that has experience, that is mindful, and really tried to be good at his or her job. Okay, determining if something is a dangerous situation, right? That is something where I would trust like a cop's gut. But if you aren't an experienced cop, or something, then you don't have the experience, then your gut, by and large, your gut isn't going to lead you in the right direction for a lot of things. And so I think that having a process for understanding what's important, as we talked about before, but also understanding how to understand and really focusing on that, it's just so ubiquitous in all of our lives. You can't run away from it. There's no way to escape process. There's always going to be some sort of process happening, be it if it's happening to you or you're intentionally pushing the process in the direction that you think goes for you.
So talk a little bit, David, because you actually brought this up originally and then again here, but understanding how to understand. Like, let's look at that and then contrast it with something.
Okay.
Right? With kind of maybe false confidence or something like that, right?
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good example. So we talk about like search engine optimization. Here's an example that happens, I think, a lot to us, especially to like we deal with clients. They see something that says SEO is great for your business. Okay. They spend 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months even reading about SEO, and they have a feeling of understanding, but they don't really understand it. And so that is kind of an example of where, you think you understand, you even get this, your brain gives you the satisfaction as if you understood it. For a lot of times, just like reading for like 4 hours, you spend 4 hours, and now it bakes you into understanding how to understand. So that would be like a contrasting situation. How would you go about this? This is such like a big question. And I feel like for me personally, and I don't know if it's the same for everyone, I kind of have to I've been working on this forever, basically since I was a teenager. I've always had a high level of curiosity and a drive to really understand how things worked. And so even if you don't have that, I think trying to instill that in yourself is going to be really helpful. And then also being kind of ruthlessly honest with yourself. You don't have to, this isn't, admitting to everyone your own errors, but it's admitting to yourself that when you made mistakes or when you made a thinking error. I think that's going to be really important. And then kind of the starting point after you have kind of those attitudes would be breaking everything down and starting from the very beginning. It's almost, think of like I was known as a kid, like I was asked, not in like a not in like a why. I was constantly asking questions, not just why over and over again, but like someone would answer something and I would think about it, to kind of like take it logically, not necessarily in like a linear fashion, a straight line fashion, but just kind of like walk through in my head. And then when I arrived at a question, I would ask about that thing as well. And I see this in my kids as well to a certain degree, to where just like asking, really trying to walk through it. And so for me, it goes like all the way back to like how to believe and how to understand what's true and what's not true. Another way to kind of put it. And starting from scratch as best you can. Obviously, you have this perception of reality, and you can, to a certain degree, you can't really question that. Maybe you can, but you kind of have to act as if like what you see is not necessarily reality, but based upon reality to a significant degree. You kind of have to move forward with that. Okay, so now you have that, and at some point in your life, you have to start from scratch and just like act as if here's a good analogy that I like to give. Act as if you've been raised by wolves. You're 18 and you never talk to a human. And you finally come into society. You have no beliefs. You have no basis for anything. You don't believe in any religion. You don't believe in any. You have basically almost kind of like no beliefs. Now that's not exactly true, but try to take yourself back to like the beginning and start from scratch and build from there. And try to find out what's true. And when you do that, I think what it does is it builds sort of a framework to where when you evaluate things after you've built kind of this solid framework. Now it might not be perfect, but as you get further and further into that, it makes your decisions that much better, and it makes it real easy to kind of identify when someone, yourself or someone else, is making kind of like an understanding mistake. It makes it real easy for you to real easy, but easier and more effortless to go, oh well, they've kind of like there's a logical disconnect there, and maybe you're just not seeing it, or maybe I'm not seeing it, but at the same time, constantly looking out for that, and it becomes easier and easier as you go along. So I kind of went off on that because I'm very passionate about this. It's something I've been working on and studying forever, as long as I can remember.
Yeah, that's like one of the things that was kind of interesting to me. It was kind of one of those moments when I was like, wow, I hadn't really thought of it this way. And it was, I recall it being sometime during college, and I found myself in like some type of like an argument or a disagreement or something like that, and like I was almost watching myself have this conversation, and I was like, you know what, both of us should almost want to be wrong, because unless we go about looking at our own beliefs and addressing the things that we're wrong about, then our life will never be any better than it is currently.
Yep.
Right? Our life is a representation of what we believe, because that leads to the actions we take, and that's really kind of what create our life. That plus luck, right? And so I really found it, at that point, I really noticed this more and more often, is that some of the people who seem to argue the most, if you just kind of look across the board at their life, they really are stuck. They're really so connected to their own beliefs, like they just won't let go of them. And they would rather win an argument than to realize that they're wrong about something, which is just complete contradiction, right? That you're literally wanting to be so stuck. Your desire to be right already is completely blocking you off from progress or evolution or whatever it might be.
I think that's really profound what you said, which is like kind of separate yourself from yourself and your ego and wanting to be right. Really try to be like, try to internalize, you just want truth, and whatever that is, wherever the truth lies, as best you can. Try to find that and work through it.
Yeah, for me, kind of going back to what we talked about, just kind of the the backstory and things like that. Having that as something that I really paid attention to in life, right, as a flag that I realized was important to help me understand, right, really what's going on. You and I both went to, college and graduate school, had, what many people would call, kind of an academic career that set us up for, having good jobs, and now both do something very different, right, for our income. I think the ability to not really be wrong, but to continue to seek what is true. I think that's a quality that many people, as they leave a job, don't maybe value as highly as I do, or as I would, or as I would suggest people kind of take a look at. Because one of the things that you can find yourself doing is defending decisions you make, and defending what you've done because it gave you this, that, or the other thing, right? I do that all the time, right? I'm glad I went to, grad school at Harvard because blah, blah, blah. And I really look at that and I'm like, really, the only good maybe that came from it is I got to see what it was like. But how in the world does that necessarily help my life right now? It doesn't, And I think there's a kind of a symptom, like a mental symptom of wanting to defend things that we've done. Oh, because it got me here, right? That's something I find myself saying. I hear other people say, I'm glad that all happened because it got me here. Well, no, I'm not glad that, the friggin' water got turned off on my pregnant wife.
Right.
It got me here, for crying out loud. I have to be glad about everything that happens in my life because it got me here somehow, magically. I don't think that's an accurate way. I don't think you're doing yourself a service if you continually say that. Because I think it clouds importance.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
There are things that really are important and you should be glad about, but it's not everything.
I think that when someone tries to do that, their intent is generally good. They're trying to probably work on their attitude. They're trying to be grateful. But at the same time, if you're missing kind of the understanding piece, then which I think is what's happening there, then you're kind of it's kind of a hollow victory in a way. Maybe it is not so bad. Maybe you really need something like that right now. You just need to be like really positive. But ultimately, to me, it's like the understanding. It's almost like a very selfish thing in that it's the results thing. Like the reason why it's so important to me to understand is because it gets me results. But it's not a short-term thing in that, it's not something that you can do overnight and then suddenly your life is better. You have to constantly work on it. And I agree. It's like a lifelong quest that I'll never complete. But I'm happy to be on it. It makes me so happy to be on it. And then there are certain points where you can look back and you can go, wow, I'm just like so much further than I was before. I'm always working, and I don't know if this is like the best. I don't think I'm putting this quite right, but I think it gets sort of the idea. I'm working on the assumption that there are some beliefs or thoughts that I have that are inaccurate, or to be more clear, are improperly arrived at. So you can't always be evaluating every little assumption that you make, but at the same time, to have sort of the humility and the lack of ego to really be able to question yourself, even when it's something like that you really think is true, especially when new evidence arises or new logic arises. I think is going to be really important. I kind of went off on that, so.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think, kind of not really, like pull it back, but like kind of tie it back together with what we kind of talked about, which is like really what you like. Maybe the main goal you have in life is to get yourself to do the right things and have it feel right, have it feel good, right? If you're in a situation where you're exercising every day because it feels like the thing to do, and you're taking good decisions or making good decisions about your finances, and taking great action in your business or your career, and supporting the relationships you have in the right way, things are good, things are easy. People would look at that life and be like, oh, that obviously that person is happy. Kind of getting back to the point where you can get your life to work more that way. It literally is getting rid of contradictions, right? Getting rid of beliefs that you have that are not true, that directly contradict other things that you believe that are true. And all of that clutter, right? This kind of the theme of simplification, all of that clutter is absolutely going to be leading to pain, stress, anxiety, confusion, which are not emotions that we like to have. So yeah, it's kind of like a general suggestion, I guess, that I have for almost anybody I run into is just get rid of the clutter, right? Get rid of you know an entire page full of goals and priorities. Like I'm over 40 and I have like 3 goals, and that's it, and they're even prioritized. It makes making decisions very easy for me.
You have,
and I think
you have no priorities.
yeah, right. And in any given situation, if one of the kids were had to go to the hospital for some reason or something, obviously that can shift. But the simpler you have, the simpler your process and method for noticing what's important and making good decisions, I think the better off your life is going to be. And I've lived that. I've lived that and realized that it's true, and it has been true for me. And the people that I know who have tried this themselves in certain ways have all, greatly improved how life feels, right? When you have a sense of understanding life, that feels good, right? So one of the things you want to understand is why having 2 or 3 or 4 goals in life is probably going to be better for you than having 20.
Oh yeah.
Right, and having this huge to-do list, and it feels like the goal is to get the to-do list done. Right, we swap these goals as like a proxy. They stand for these other things. So like it's important for me to run 5 miles today. Well, no, it's like literally never important to run 5 miles unless you have to be someplace 5 miles away.
Your car.
Most of the time, people's goals are to be healthy, to be fit, to be strong. But then we change in these other things like, I have this goal, I have to get this website done today. No, that's not the goal. The goal is to get the website done properly, right? Or to get it over a threshold where it's actually working or making income. And I think a lot of people kind of, they plot and they plan their days and lose track of what those actual goals and priorities are, right? And they switch in these activities. We feel busy and we can say, I worked so hard today, and then I feel good about my effort, but I haven't got the result yet, and so it's all for naught.
Yeah, actually, I think I want to expand on what you said there with regards to like kind of losing track during the day of what's important to you, and what I do, and I think I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. My mom was telling me about it when I was a kid, but I wasn't really paying attention. So I think I do. So I have to work on my mind every day, especially in the mornings. Every morning I do certain things. I do like just a little bit. It's not like a lot. I do like 15 minutes of like an indoor cycling. Okay. And that helps get kind of the blood flowing. I do about 15 minutes of yoga. Again, it's maybe even less. It's not a lot. Again, it kind of wakes the brain up. I do a little bit of meditation, just a little bit. We're not talking an hour, 5 to 10 minutes. And then I do sort of like a 5 minute, sometimes it's as little as like 1 minute of sort of like a journal, like that is like, okay, so what am I grateful for, and why am I going to work hard today? And then maybe any other sort of like a good way to phrase it's like a brain dump. And so these sort of like 4 things. Well, it might sound like, wow, it's it sounds kind of like a lot, but it's really not like a lot of time. It helps me stay focused. And then you add that to like tying, like having a daily, a weekly, a monthly, quarterly, yearly, and then like a 10 or 5 or 20 year goals, and tying, working backwards from that all the way to your daily. And so tying your daily to your weekly, which is tied to your monthly, it's again, et cetera, that's going to help you stay focused on what's important. And especially, you have a prioritized list. And I've done this in the past where I take on too much stuff and I've got like 7 priorities. And what ends up happening is like maybe like the bottom 2 don't get worked on. And so I just have to either drop them or pass them off to someone else. And I think that being able to kind of streamline and focus on what's important is going to be super effective in that way. So I wanted to expand on your so throughout the day, how do you know what's important? Well, you compare it to sort of like your weekly goals, or you compare it to what I do is at the end of every day, I plan the next day, and I write I basically write like, okay, in order. So in order of importance, what am I going to work on first? If I don't get to the last one, well, that's fine. I've worked on what's important until it's done, or until I can't really, or don't need to really work on it anymore. And I know, and I'm pulling that stuff from my weekly, which my weekly is coming from my monthly. And so that is how I personally stay focused. I know that it's not necessarily required for everyone, but it's required for me, again, because I think I have ADHD or ADD or whatever. And so I have to really constantly, every day, be telling my brain what is important and why I'm going to work and what I'm going to work on.
Yeah, it's interesting, David. I don't know a lot about that condition or label or whatever, but I do get a sense of that for people that operate that way more than others, right? That it's even more important to potentially more important to not be distracted. I guess I'm trying to figure out a way of putting it, but I've heard people that take like Adderall to study and like all these different things, and it kind of makes them like hyper focused almost. Mm-hmm. Based on obviously your experience, that's the only thing we can really speak from. What are there things in the physical environment? Are there things that are more that are just solely in your head that you can notice? You kind of go off on these tangents of thought at times. Like what is it that kind of looks like? I guess from
that's a really so yeah my staying. So if I don't, it's worse if I don't do these like disciplines in the morning, and my thoughts just like easily drift to whatever. And the way I fight that is again through the disciplines, but then I sort of like the keeping the unhealthy food away from you. Like I don't leave Facebook up. I don't leave my email open. I try to turn off my phone, and not turn it off, but like put it on silent so that things don't distract me when I'm trying to do deep work. Because a lot of what we do, I think, is what I would call deep work. It's where you like the efficiency and the productivity level that you can do something with when you first start it is much less than like if you've been doing it for like the past 30 minutes to like an hour and a half or something. If you've been really focusing on it, you just become a lot better at it, as opposed to like doing dishes isn't really deep work. And it's just sort of like you do it for X amount. You don't really get more efficient and more productive at it as you go on. And so this is super important. And so ask me what it feels like. Again, it just feels like a constant. My brain constantly wanted to go into different directions and constantly want to chase down certain thoughts. And one way I do that is I take a lot of notes. And so if I have an idea, and so I'm working on a X project, and I have an idea about Y project, I take that and I have a system where I put that down somewhere so it barely distracts me at all, and then my brain isn't trying to remember it or process it. I put it down and I put it down in a system to where I'll deal with it later. Or like an action comes in that I need to get done, but I'm still working. I'm still in the middle of like an action set for project X. Okay, again, I take it and I put it in like a note section where I'm going to look at it like at the end of the week, and so that I'll put it on my next like weekly agenda. And that's really important for helping with that. But again, it's just again to answer your question for the third time, it's really distractions are just so easy to happen for me, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that you're really going to be able to help a lot of people with. Not only your systems and processes, which kind of they get into the technical, just the hows and what have yous of getting through a project or getting through a day or getting through whatever. Because whether that's ADD, ADHD, or whatever, I think everyone has times when they, an idea will come into their mind, and then half an hour later they realize that they're working on this new idea that came into their mind instead of the thing that they actually need to get done. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that's a very, very common thing to have happen for everyone. And I'm really anxious to see kind of more of the things that you have that work and turn into, processes that kind of, I guess I would say are on the technical side, but they really are just about working with your brain, right? Mm-hmm. And how your brain typically works. Each brain's a little bit different, but the defaults are pretty much the same. So, having some of those systems and processes in place, I think will be really key and critical to, okay, this is all great, but how do I do this?
Yeah.
Right. That's going to be a lot of the, okay, this is how I do this, right? And then obviously I'll have some things that I want to add as well, but this is really one of the strengths that I've seen, that I've come to learn about you, David, which is, in certain ways it may have come from how easy, how much you recognized how easy it is for you to get distracted on things,
Yeah.
right? And what you need to do and put in place to make sure that does not happen
Like it was,
as frequently.
I think it was something that I would say, like in my default programming, I'd be deficient in, and I worked on it so hard that I think it's become a strength.
Yeah.
Because
Just knowing what I know about you, I think you probably exceed most people's, productivity and distraction-free work.
I try. I want to go really quick back to the idea that you have. It might be a really great idea, so you want to reward your brain and capture that idea, but you don't want to, like you said, you have things that you have to get done today. You want to make sure that you stay focused on those things, but you want to reward your brain, and so there's kind of a balance there. And I think we could have a whole podcast about sort of systems and productivity, and maybe 5 podcasts about it. I'm very passionate about it. I appreciate your kind comments on that.
Oh yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, because any given situation, knowing the land, knowing what you need to do to make sure things get done properly, is just going to increase output, right, and make you less stressed and all sorts of things that lead to better sleep, and then it's just kind of a snowball in a good way. So the practical side of doing that sort of thing, I think, is probably not going to be part of most people's habits unless someone's employer brings in some trainer that has all these systems in place, right? When you're out there on your own, it's really on you to figure out what you need to do and what needs to be done, and then how to go about doing that. So
yeah, I think it keeps open loops are very distracting in general. So having kind of an incomplete thought, the reason why you've spent 30 minutes thinking about this thing is because it's interesting and maybe it is important. But having kind of a system to where you can take that thought, put it to the side, give it just a few seconds of attention, but then get back to what you were doing, so you don't have a loss of efficiency, or you kind of do things in the order that they need to be done. It simplifies things. It helps me stay focused a lot. If I'm trying to hold all of my priorities in my head and all the things I get done in my head, man, that would just I'd go nuts and I'd get nothing done. I'd probably get a bunch of stuff done that in the wrong order, or that doesn't need to get done as urgently as other things, or as importantly as other things. So yeah, cool. I mean, just discipline. I think there's you mentioned discipline quite a while ago. Discipline's super important. It's not just the discipline of I think a lot of people think of brushing your teeth as a discipline. Yeah, that's a good discipline. There's kind of exterior disciplines, and there's also interior disciplines, which is, I think a lot of people don't talk about as much, and we've talked a lot about that. It's having the discipline to think, the thinking disciplines, to process things, to try to understand things properly, to have the discipline to question yourself, to be open to the fact that what you said was wrong, or what, you made mistakes. That's okay. That's fine. You're human. You can make mistakes. Anyone's to be perfect, even if you're a leader. I think a lot of people try to front not just to other people but to themselves. They have to be this perfect, shining example of everything. And in the end, short term, I think it can work. In the end, I think it's not productive for you or for anyone else you're trying to help.
Yeah, there was I think maybe Samuel Clemens wrote something to the effect that the only thing you need to really pay attention to is just to not get fooled, and it turns out that the easiest person to fool, it's easy to fool yourself. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually harder for someone else to fool you than it is for you to fool yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's a butchered quote, but I think it does say a lot about the the willingness and also the ability to be able to look at yourself and understand what's going on, what's causing, certain decisions or certain thoughts or, how things feel. To be able to kind of get to the bottom of that and understand that is really kind of the keys to the kingdom as far as unlocking what, because it's like, if you're trying to make a change, right, we're talking about cubicle liberation, kind of getting out of your day job and being able to be, an entrepreneur and work largely on the internet, right, nowadays, you're going to have to change behavior, right? The things that, doing everything that you do right now is not going to be sufficient to get you the success you need, that you want to achieve that's outside of what you're currently doing. And so, in some ways, I look at that as a behavior problem. I say problem just because, you've identified wanting to do something different. Well, the easiest way to understand behavior is to look at what you're doing currently and then, kind of match that up with a model and a framework of understanding brains, and then kind of getting to the bottom of what your goals are, by action. If you say, well, my goal is health, but I find myself eating a gallon of ice cream a week, it's pretty obvious there's another goal in there too. It's not that you don't have the goal of health, but you've got a contradictory goal, or a goal that's pulling you the other direction, right? A vector that's moving not all in alignment. And I think, we talk about simplification, something that goes along with that is really having everything that serves one another, right? It's not going the opposite direction. So if you have a goal to be able to eat whatever you want, but you also have a goal to run ultra marathons,
right?
Those two things are going to be they're not always going to work out well together.
Right. I think it goes back to your simplification. If goals are clashing up against each other, it just dramatically complicates things for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if you've got a goal to really like yourself or be, plugged into current events, and you've got a goal to start a business, those might not work together very well, right? The things you're going to have to do as far as reading newspapers or watching news or, going to, hear speakers or whatever it might be, those might not be the things that are going to help you get your business going. So, understanding that priorities are important, but sometimes you just have to fully drop goals.
Yep.
Because if they're in there, they're going to monkey around with what seems like should be the thing you do right now.
Yep.
Yep.
I have one more hack that I would like to
Oh, cool. Yeah, I want to hear it.
I've never heard anyone talk about it quite like this, or maybe somebody else, or maybe it is somebody. But when someone asks me, "Do you believe X?" I kind of have to take a really big step back and explain to them that I don't, for the most part, I don't have 0 or 1 beliefs. I do act as if. So when I sit in a chair, I don't do I believe this chair is real, or do I believe it's going to help you? Well, I act as if. So I do a lot of acting as if. But by and large, I kind of look at things on a scale almost. It's not quite that simple, but and I think this is going to really help people understand. So understand themselves and understand the world a little bit better when you can look at things and well, yeah, I think I'm right, but there's other things that are contradictory, or maybe I don't have a lot of data on something. So maybe I'm 95% confident. Now I'm just kind of pulling numbers out of my butt, but really, really thinking about I think this comes down to a little bit of humility and understanding that there's our ability to perceive. In order to have faith in an idea, first you have to have faith in your own ability to understand and perceive the world, to perceive and understand the world. And while I think I have do a pretty good job of that, there's certainly some blocks or some inefficiencies or some things that are kind of reflections of what's real that are coming through. And this is an acknowledgement of that, do I like this? Do I think this person likes me? Okay, well, it's kind of is not a 0 or 1 thing. Do I think that I'm going to succeed? Well, it's not a 0 or 1 thing, but generally yes. It kind of clarifying, your beliefs is not something that you have to be all or nothing in. I think is going to be really, really helpful in understanding and being open to kind of being flexible with that. Well, maybe yesterday you were at 99%, and now today you're at 50%. New data came in. or a new idea came in that makes you question it. That's fine. And being open to that, I think, is going to be really helpful. Having the 0 to 1, not trying to have 0 to 1 beliefs is going to be really helpful. I think a lot of people don't have 0 to 1 beliefs, but they act as if they have 0 or 1 beliefs.
Yeah, that's that act as if. I think we might just do a whole topic on that.
Yeah,
and have it
I agree.
Because I think it's really, that's kind of the meta hack of, that's kind of behind the fake it until you make it type thing, right? You don't really have to fake it, but you have to act as if. I think that's something I think we can draw a lot more attention to, and have it be one of these things that really opens people's eyes.
Yeah.
To how do you get yourself to believe you can do something you've never done before?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, you might not completely believe. You might only be 50% belief, but you act as if you can do it, and it actually helps you. Sometimes believing or acting as if can actually help you. There's something that like faith can be useful and practical in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's this kind of goes along with something I'll probably talk about on one of these episodes as well, which is one of the really big overwhelming elements that come with achievement, right? Is confidence across the board, right? I'm not saying it needs to be there every time, but I think a lot of people go about trying to get confidence the wrong way. I was talking to a copywriter in our industry at Ty Lopez's house this last summer, and we were talking about this, right? Confidence, and I was asking him, what books he's read, and or what his concepts about confidence are, and they're mostly, well, how do you get yourself to have more confidence, right? They're like, you listen to music with this certain beats per minute, and different things. Watch Rocky IV, that kind of thing, right? And it works, right? It makes you feel more confident. But has it really changed your ability at all? And the answer is no.
A hollow bit.
And so it's hollow. But the weird thing is it does tend to get people to take more action, and to follow that action through a little bit more, and so it winds up leading to a lot of people's success stories. It winds up weaving its way into that. And what I really want to do is to get underconfident, right? So it's kind of like, there are a lot of people overconfident. I kind of want to get under it. I want to understand what it comes from, what it is, because if you can understand where confidence comes from, then you can create the conditions where confidence is the result.
It's strong,
right?
It's stronger than like watching Rocky. You've laid a much firmer, and it's going to last for a lot longer.
Yeah, it's transferable. It goes with you.
Yeah.
When Rocky's beating the Russian, that feeling lasts for a little while, but then it goes away. And I think what we're really talking about here, and we may kind of adjust some of the podcasts in the future to this, is really just engineering your life and engineering your liberation plan, right? Designing it, understanding the pieces that need to go into it, what are the prime effects variables, and then really just optimizing those in your own life. So yeah, I kind of did want to comment on that confident thing, or the confidence thing, because a lot of times people, when they are setting out to do something, they find themselves one day being like all gung-ho and get a bunch of work done, and then the next day it doesn't feel like that.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, I don't feel like doing that.
That's the Rocky effect happening. They get real excited, and maybe it's for like a day, a week, maybe like a month, but you need something more sustained, and which doesn't require, but when you approach it from a sense of like understanding, as you talked about, is going to be have a lot more staying power. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have confidence every day of your life. There are things that will happen that it's okay to be to feel bad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to have a moment where you're like, man, am I doing the right thing? That's fine. But to be consistently working on kind of not so much a single trajectory, but along a certain path. The path is not going to be like a linear line, but to keep taking steps on the path that you've chosen, or some path that you might not even know the whole path. It is going to be super clear.
Yeah, I realized that, being overconfident or confident for the wrong things is like the most dangerous thing in the world.
Yeah, I can fly.
Like, why would you want to do that? Right. Yeah. It's like, no,
you can't.
not being confident is a safety factor. Like you need to not be overconfident about the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then that kind of just comes back to, well, then what do I need to be confident about? Right. And what does confident come from? So I think it's a whole topic that we'll kind of unravel and investigate some more, because it's changed a lot of my relationship with my own feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't feel like this is going to work. Well, what in the hell does that have to do with whether it's going to work or not?
Right.
You've been wrong about so many things in your life.
Yep.
What in the world do you think that this is the time you're right? Doesn't make sense.
No one in existence has been right about everything. You,
right.
The listener, there are things that you believe right now that you should probably question, okay? And especially if you aren't where you want to be in your life, there's going to be some assumptions, there's going to be some beliefs that you have that you're going to need to maybe not tear down completely, but maybe like pick apart and modify to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, you got to be able to question yourself.
Yeah.
Everybody will get in an argument with someone else, but they won't get in an argument with themselves. So
I think we covered this
maybe
really
that's
well.
something that you need to spend some time on.
Yeah.
Come up with a course, how to argue with yourself.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, cool, David. I think we've kind of covered this topic from a bunch of different angles, and we're certainly not done with it, because just the mental side is kind of like half of the battle. But I also know that kind of fresh legs and fresh topics sometimes help really kind of triangulate things and help people see things from a bunch of different angles. So and unless there is something that you'd like to make sure we cover on this episode before we wrap up, I think we may go ahead and wind it down for this episode.
Well, we'll see you next time on the Cubicle Liberation podcast.
Love it. You guys take care. See you soon.